Hey everyone, welcome to Pagan Happy Hour. Happy Friday or happy Freya's Day. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. If you are new here, I want to give you a big warm welcome. I do Pagan Happy Hour every Friday at 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern. And it's just a way for us fellow pagans and witches to connect, to discuss a topic. We go over a different topic every week. And I will be looking to the right here. I will be looking at your comments as they come in. So I'm going to do my best to bring in your thoughts and your ideas into the conversation as well. So let's jump into it. But before we do, I would love for you all in the comments to tell me where you happen to be watching from today and what you are drinking. So let me cue the drink music and we will get started. So I'm just having a nice red wine today and I can see you all chiming in now. Let's see where you guys are from. So looks like we have people today from Boston, from Chile, Pennsylvania, Seattle, California, Indiana, Michigan, Kentucky, North Carolina, Sweden. Let's see, Oklahoma, Massachusetts, Arizona, North Dakota, Hawaii, England, New Jersey, Maryland, Michigan, Houston. Let's see, New Hampshire, Ohio, Minnesota, Kansas City, San Francisco, Argentina, Finland, and New Jersey. Woo! Thank you guys for joining me. So if you like Pagan Happy Hour, if you like to support the show, there are two ways you can do that. The first is through my Patreon, which I have linked down below. If you do choose to join, you get access to my exclusive Discord community. So it's a great place to meet and chat with fellow pagans, to share resources, ideas, photos, all of that good community stuff. And the other way you can support the show is through Super Chats, which is the $ button at the bottom of the chat. Through that, you can donate any amount. Your comment or question will pop up real big for me, so I'll be sure to see it and bring your idea or thought into the conversation. So now that we got that done, let me turn off the wine music and let's start talking about our topic of the week. So today we are going to be discussing Freya. Now, this is a goddess that I haven't talked too much about yet on my channel. So I was really excited when one of my Patreons suggested this topic for a future Pagan Happy Hour. And luckily, you guys chose it in the polls. And if you don't know, I do a poll for the topic of Pagan Happy Hour every Thursday. So if you'd like to vote, to share your ideas on future topics, you can definitely always do that on my community page. So we're going to be talking about Freya today, and she is a very beguiling goddess. There's a lot of aspects to her. She's kind of difficult to pin down. It's not like she's simply the goddess of one thing. She's the goddess of many things. So that's what we're going to be covering today. And let me take a sip of my wine, and we're going to jump into a few things to get started. And I can see you guys in the comments asking your questions already. I see someone asking, let's see, Skyline is asking if she's Norse. Yes, she is a Norse goddess. Another question coming in right away from Adam. What offerings does Freya prefer? That's another good one. So, like all of the Norse deities, mead is always a great option, right? That's always a good go-to. Now, Freya, as we'll discuss, is kind of a materialistic goddess. She likes her gold, she likes her shiny objects. Even certain crystals like amber can be a really good offering, or any type of shiny trinket or jewelry item. So a lot of different options for offerings. So yeah, we'll jump into kind of why that is, why I mentioned kind of the gold, the materialism aspect in a bit. But first I should probably mention that I'm using the term Freya, the pronunciation, but that's not really the correct pronunciation. It's closer to Freyja. So I debated, should I pronounce it the correct way? But the vast majority of Americans just say Freya. So I'm going to say Freya for today. But I just wanted to let you guys know that I know that's not the correct Old Norse pronunciation. Um, Another interesting thing about Freya's name, it's not really a name. It's more of a title, meaning miss or lady. It comes from the root of kind of Fraujo from Old Norse, which is the same root that you see in Germanic cultures, Frau. So if you spent any time in Germany, if you know any German, you're aware that women are sometimes referred to as Frau. And we even talked about some German witches and aspects of folklore like Frau Holle or Frau Holda a few months ago. So Frau is the same kind of root that we get Freya. So really what her name is means lady. It's possible this is a kind of a more recent development that back before the Viking Age, she might have had a different name and that it slowly became just this kind of moniker known as the lady. So that was an interesting point. And likewise, her brother, Freyr, is just the masculine version of that. So that means Mr. or Lord. So kind of really interesting there, the kind of name terminology, the fact that it's not really a name at all. Let me check your comments here, see what you guys have to say. Okay, great question coming in from Jakara, asking, is Freya considered a triple goddess? Or are the titles in the header only a few of them? Yes, so Freya is not really a triple goddess. For the title of this video, I just chose a few attributes to put in there. But as far as I know, she's not really considered one of the triple goddesses. Let's see. Let me see what else you guys have here. I see a lot of you guys have a lot of personal connections with Freya, which is wonderful. Jenna in the comments is mentioning how she works with Freya a lot and named her daughter after her. That's lovely. And then Carolina in the comments is saying Freya is not a goddess I'm working with, but the more I learn about her, the more I want to make offerings to her just to honor her. Yeah, awesome. So I know a lot of you all have a very strong personal connection to Freya, which is really neat. Now, another thing I should mention that is true to not just Freya's lore and her stories and mythology, but really all of the Norse goddesses. And this is that we don't really have that many stories about them. There are bits and pieces we know about Freya and the other goddesses like Frigg and Idun, but it's pretty limited. And this begs a really interesting question. Is the limited information we have because there really weren't that many stories being told about goddesses during the Viking Age in Old Norse? Or is it just a matter of they didn't survive the test of time? You know, they weren't written down after the Christianization, and we just don't have the information, unfortunately. So if it's the first instance where people weren't really sitting around telling stories of goddesses and it was mostly just the gods, it makes you wonder a little bit about the role of goddesses in Norse society or even the role of women in Norse society. So just an interesting thought, just a neat thing to kind of think about why it is that we have so little information about the goddesses, but we have a decent amount of information about the gods. You can contrast this to something like Greco-Roman paganism, where we have plenty of information about the goddesses, almost as much, if not as much, as we know about the gods. And we have a super chat coming in from Kelly B. Thank you so much for the donation. I'm glad to see you're enjoying today's show. So And Quinn here in the comments is mentioning, I think the Christians may have tried to erase her. And yes, they would probably have a good motive to do that, specifically because Freya is associated with things that the Christians aren't quite comfortable with, which we're going to get into. So it is also highly likely that the Norse people had many stories of goddesses, that goddesses played a huge role in their religion, but they weren't written down specifically because Christians wanted to suppress information of goddesses, especially strong female erotic goddesses such as Freya. So now when we think about what Freya is the goddess of, she's the goddess of many things, and it's not as simple and cut and dry as we like to make it seem in our nice little charts where we have our little comparisons. We have Freya in the Norse as the goddess of love, which matches Venus, and the Roman, which matches Aphrodite. In the Norse world, it's a bit more fluid. It's not as cut and dry, and it doesn't quite fit into a nice little chart that we can organize. Her role has changed over time in the Old Norse society and across the different countries, right? How Freya was worshipped in Iceland would be very different than Norway and Sweden. So there's a lot of variation here, which makes it difficult to precisely say what she is the goddess of. So a good way to think about pagan gods and goddesses is they are very complex and nuanced individuals, just like us humans. So it's almost a little weird when we try and classify them specifically as the goddess of that or the god of that. We need to look at them with a bit more of a nuanced perspective. But to simplify things, Freya is associated with a few different traits. The first one is love. Now, when I say love, it's going to be more of a physical love as opposed to a emotional love, though there is some of that, which we'll get into. She is the goddess of beauty. In the prose and poetic Edda and the other poems, she was renowned for her beauty. She was the most beautiful of the goddesses, and her beauty is mentioned many times. So she's a great goddess to work with for anyone who wants to do a bit of that glamour magic, perhaps. She is also associated with sex. I don't know how much I can talk about that and not get demonetized from YouTube. So I won't go into too much detail there, but that is definitely one of her traits. She's associated with gold and wealth in general. She loved beautiful things. She loved to wear jewelry, to search for gold, to express herself in finery. So, in that way, she is the goddess of materialism, both in a positive and a negative way you could look at it. She is also a goddess of war. Kind of unusual here. You don't normally find goddesses in like ancient Rome that are both a goddess of war and beauty, but in the Norse world, things were a bit different. So yeah, she does have that connotation of being associated with battles and war. And that's in part because she actually got her pick of the slain. The warriors who had died, she would get half of them would go to her hall, and the other half would go to Odin. So, already you can see this is a very complex goddess with a lot of nuanced aspects to her. Let's see. Sarah has a super chat here. Thank you so much, Sarah. That says, been trying to remain in faith as Christianity has hurt me in the past. I think many of us can relate to being hurt by Christianity. Let's see. Oh, and she mentions that she loves tapping into her Roma heritage with paganism. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for the donation. And, I think many of us can relate. I don't know about you guys in the comments, but I feel like we've all been hurt by Christianity a little bit in the past. And that's maybe why we're here today. Let's see. Checking your comments now. Ooh. Oh, interesting comment here about potentially her information being erased during the Christianization. Let's see. Wind Doan in the comments is mentioning that remember the Christians were doing magic during the 1000s and beyond when the erasure of the Norse gods were dropped. She wasn't erased because of her connection to magic. That's interesting and very possible. We do know that Christianity did not shy away from magic. You have characters like John Dee in the Renaissance. You have in the early modern period, you have the cunning folk. So it's not that Christians were entirely opposed to magic. They just wanted certain types of magic, and certain other types of magic, especially womanly magic, was definitely a no-no in Christian society. But great point there. That was interesting. Let's see. Okay. Checking your comments. Ooh, Rachel is asking, is she similar to the Morrigan? Good question. So if you're unfamiliar, the Morrigan is from the Celtic pagan culture. Now, the Morrigan is also a battle goddess, but other than that, she doesn't really share any similarity to Freya, in my opinion. The Morrigan is associated with kind of dark things and death, whereas in Freya is more associated with beauty and love and sex and all that kind of stuff, which definitely are things not really associated with the Morrigan. So I would say maybe there's a little connection there, but I would connect the Morrigan maybe more with someone like Hecate from the Greek pantheon, if you had to pick. Let's see. What else do we have here? Okay. Ooh, good question in the comments from Pagan Chords. Do you think she's married to Odin, or do you think Odin and Odin are different gods? Now, this gets interesting. Are you ready for this? Because this is like a whole debatable thing here. So a lot of people have been wondering, are Freya and Frigg the same goddess? And the scholarship on this is kind of mixed, and it is really confusing. So at first glance, you would say they're not the same person. They are different people. They are different goddesses entirely with their own domains, with their own attributes. And why you might say that is because in the Prose Edda, you have references to Frigg and Freya as different people. There's a part where Loki is insulting all of the different gods and goddesses. I think this is actually in the poem Lokasena. So he's insulting all the different gods and goddesses, and he insults Freya, then Frigg, as kind of different people, and then they respond to him as different people, and they even talk to each other, really suggesting, okay, these are different goddesses. But it gets confusing because we know for sure Frigg is married to Odin. Freya is married to Odr. And if you look at the Old Norse, Odr is basically just another term for Odin. And it really kind of means the one who wanders, which is obviously a moniker of Odin. I actually have a link down below in my description box of a Jackson Crawford video all about Frigg and Freya. And he dives into, the whole question of, are they different? Are they the same? What could be happening here? Because it's really unlikely Odin had two wives. I really don't think he was married to both Frigg and Freya. But it suggests that they were both married to Odin. So this gets kind of complex. Now, there are some other possibilities here. It's possible that Frigg was an earlier name for Freya. So when you look at the timeline here, obviously Norse paganism changed over time and it changed between the different regions. So it is possible that Frigg was that earlier name for Freya, because remember, we were mentioning that Freya is not even a name; it's a title that means lady. So it's possible that just kind of that name shift happened, and that's why Odin is married to both of them. That's one option. So it's kind of tricky. I really do think that Other, Freya's husband, is really likely Odin. According to the Prose Edda, Freya's husband is missing, is wandering. And then she goes out searching for him, and she's kind of weeping in sadness, trying to find her husband. And the tears that fall on the ground turn into gold. And the tears that fall into the sea turn into amber, which is why amber and gold are two stones really associated with Freya and would be a great thing to put on an altar if you do have any amber or a gold necklace or something like that. If you want to put it on your altar to honor Freya, that would be a really perfect thing. But this whole idea of her husband missing, wandering, yeah, I think it's likely Odin, and also the title of her husband Other also means madness, and madness is a trait very much associated with Odin. Odin, people think of him mostly as a god of wisdom and war, but primarily he was kind of a god of madness and chaos. So that was a really great question, and it definitely led us down a rabbit hole. So I do think that they are, my personal opinion here, different deities, Frigg and Freya. They may have at one time been one deity, or differences between cultures or time periods. But how I look at them now in my personal pagan practice, I treat them as two separate deities. Let's see. Ooh, you guys have lots of interesting questions and thoughts on this theory. Ooh. Okay, Sarah has another super chat with a good question. Asking thoughts on wanting to work with goddesses like Kali, Lilith, and the Morrigan, as sometimes they can be scary. Yeah, this is a good question and something you should probably consider if you are working with a deity that has a bit of a darkness to them. It's not something you should do lightly. It's definitely not something off limits. There are no limits in paganism. You can kind of do what you feel comfortable doing. But yeah, a lot of people nowadays will work with a deity like Loki, for example, a god of mischief and chaos. And, that would be something I would be a little bit cautious of. Not something I would do, but I'm also not going to tell people not to do it. So yeah, that was a good question. Let's see, what else do we have? Ooh. Good comment here from Uru's Strength that says both Freya and Frigg are goddesses with prophetic ability. Could be the same goddess, but better to honor more goddesses, but not enough. Yes, they are both associated with prophecy, with telling the future, which, kind of leads into another big aspect of Freya. So Freya is kind of the goddess of Norse magic. And this is something I talked extensively about in last week's Pagan Happy Hour. The topic of last week's Pagan Happy Hour was Norse magic. And we talked about Satyr, which is a type of prophetic magic associated with Freya. And then we also talked about the Vova, who were the female practitioners of this Norse magical practice. I have the link down below if you didn't catch last week's Pagan Happy Hour. So I recommend checking that out because there's a really good chat where we discuss kind of both the historical and practical applications of Norse magic. And Freya specifically is very much tied to this form of prophecy. It said that she was the one who gave the Aesir gods this magic. She is the primary goddess associated with prophecy, though occasionally you do see Frigg associated with it. So when humans, when we try to do prophecy, we can call upon Freya for any type of divination to help us, because she is the one that gave that gift to the Aesir and also to us humans. Now, Freya is not part of the Aesir. She's actually part of the Vanir. So there are two sets of gods in Norse paganism, which makes it a bit different from Greco-Roman paganism, for example. Of course, I guess you could say in Greco-Roman paganism, there are definitely subsets of gods because you have like the Titans and all that stuff. But here in Norse paganism, the Vanir are more associated with things like fertility and prophecy. That's why you see Freya's brother, Freyr, as a god of fertility. And if you've ever seen any statues of Freyr, you'll know what I mean. He's definitely a god of fertility. But Freya is not so much a goddess of fertility in the agricultural aspect, like we see certain other goddesses in different cultures, like Demeter or Persephone or Ceres, definitely goddesses of an agricultural fertility. Freya is more associated with the conception aspect, the female, the sexy part of fertility, I guess I'll say. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Let's see what other questions you guys have. Let's see. Oh, Joey here is giving an interesting comment about the terminology, specifically for Odin. So Odin has many names, and that depends on what area, what region you're looking at. So you have Odin, but then you also have Wotan and Woden. So all of them are basically the same god, just different names disseminated over different time periods and cultures. So it's possible Freya was kind of similar, where she had different names, different aspects, depending on what culture time you were looking at. And maybe some of that was lost to history, unfortunately. Let's see, what else do we have here? Ooh, interesting comment here from Graves with a good theory that I like. He says, archaeologically, I've heard the giants are the Stone Age gods, the Vanir are the Bronze Age gods, and the Aesir are the Iron Age gods. They kept the older gods and merged them. Ooh, I really like this theory. That's a good one. Okay, awesome. And then I see some of you asking questions about offerings for Freya. And yeah, so if you don't have something like amber, because obviously that's expensive and difficult to get, really anything like flowers, really beautiful things can be used for her. And of course, mead is always a great option. Now, it doesn't have to be mead. It could be another alcoholic beverage, but it should be a nice one, because Freya liked nice fancy things. So any type of nice fancy thing you can think of, even if you think of taking it to a modern perspective here. If we're thinking about a food offering, maybe not a simple piece of fruit, maybe a deluxe pastry you pick up. Anything super luxury, materialist vibes, those would be great offerings for Freya. She wanted to stand apart from the other gods and goddesses through her beauty, through her elevated sense of self. So, lots of ideas there. Okay. Ooh, interesting comment from Wish on a Foxtail saying, I would like to see more on lesser known goddesses like Frigg and Hel Freya gets too much attention, hey, definitely consider, throwing me a comment or two for a future poll. Maybe we'll have a future pagan happy hour on Frigg or Hell, because definitely good topics for a future one. So a few other things about Freya we should mention. Now, we mentioned that she's like a goddess of beauty, love, sex, gold, war, and Satyr, the magic system. She's also the owner of a gold necklace. This is a famous gold necklace, or torque. And she gets this necklace in the stories. This is definitely one of the main stories featuring Freya. She sees the dwarves creating this beautiful necklace, and she's just mesmerized. She has to have it, right? Because she needs that luxury in her life. And this is kind of a naughty story, but so she offers them gold, gems, anything, rubies, whatever, and they all refuse because the dwarves obviously have enough wealth. And they ask to spend a night with her. So she spends several nights with each of the dwarves there. And in return, she is gifted the necklace, the great gold necklace. So she is known for this beautiful gold necklace, and you'll see it in drawings, interpretations of her. And the other gods, noticed this. They knew this story, and she was kind of, slut shamed for it. And in a way, she is kind of a goddess I feel like you can turn to when us women, we feel like we get slut shamed from time to time. Freya is a good goddess to work with healing some of that trauma, because it's not good. It's not a good feeling to feel that way. And Freya definitely got called out big time by the other Norse gods in the Prose and Poetic Edda. And so when I think about female trauma, things like that, or just kind of feeling like your value is lessened due to your past experiences, Freya, I think, is a goddess that can kind of help you heal through part of that trauma. So just wanted to mention that too. It's an interesting story. I highly recommend reading, the Prose Edda if you haven't yet. So yeah, that's one of her stories. Another thing that she has, along with her beautiful gold necklace, is this cloak of falcon feathers that can turn anyone into kind of a falcon so that they can fly. And Loki actually uses this cloak in one of these stories. Though there is some debate back and forth on if this falcon cloak belongs to Frigg or Freya. Again, we're getting kind of this weird intermixing of Frigg and Freya, so we don't know for sure. But in some of the stories, specifically the ones written by Snorri Sturluson, describe Freya having the cloak of feathers. So that's pretty cool. Another thing that I love about Freya, because I have 2 cats, is Freya was pulled by a chariot that had cats. The cats pulled the chariot, which is kind of weird. And they weren't like lions or tigers. They're just like domestic, regular cats. There's a ton of really adorable artwork you can find with Freya in this chariot with her cats. So cats associated with things like witchcraft, magic, that kind of goes all the way back to Freya, right? Because she is the one that has the gift of prophecy. She is the one that can practice magic. And of course, she's got to have her cats. She also is associated with a boar. She is often seen with this large, giant boar that sometimes she rides the boar, which Loki makes fun of her doing. I'm not going to get into that, but so she has these kind of 2 modes of transportation. Does she want to ride the boar, or does she want to get in her chariot pulled by cats? So just some really kind of cute little details about Freya that I enjoy. And, another thing that's neat about her is she kind of has her own like heavenly field that she rules over. She has her own space. And that is where the people who were slain in battle, they go to her hall in her own kind of realm. Just as kind of like Odin has his own realm in a way where the other half of the fallen in battle go to Odin's hall, and then some go to Freya's hall. I wonder if you were a Norse warrior, a Viking perhaps, and you were going to battle, like thinking, I wonder which hall I'll end up in if I pass away today. And if they had a preference. On the one hand, you get Odin, but on the other hand, you get this beautiful goddess. It's a toss up. So comment below which hall you would like to join when you die. Let's see. Let me check your comments here and see what you guys have to say. Ooh, Graves is asking about the boar that's associated with Freya. Saying the boar is more of a Celtic symbol. Any cross-contamination there? Very possible. I don't know when Freya started to get associated with the boar, but it's definitely true that there are a lot of boar imagery in Celtic paganism. So perhaps, yeah, definitely. Great question. Heathen Hedge Witch is asking, what do you know about Freya's daughters? I believe Freya has 2 daughters, correct me if I'm wrong. But one of the neat things about Freya's association with Stater and magic is that was usually something that was passed down from mother to daughter. So it makes sense that she would have daughters so that she could then pass down that magical and divinatory knowledge to them. So we don't know that much about them in the story, but good question. Shin is asking, did shield maidens go to Freya's hall? If shield maidens were to die in a battle, I think it would be kind of the same thing. Like, I don't know which hall they end up in. Freya gets pick of her half. So perhaps. Let's see. Rustic Hippie Witch is asking, do we know what her cats' names were for Freya's chariot? I don't know. I couldn't find that. Comment below if you know the names of her cats. I think there is a source out there that does have the names. So definitely comment if you happen to know. I see a few of you guys chiming in now about which hall you would join. It's a tough question. I'm not sure which hall I'd rather join. Let's see. So another great story I would recommend reading is the one where Thor's hammer gets stolen by a Jotun or a giant. And they come up with this crazy scheme. Well, first they try and convince Freya to marry the giant. And she was very upset by this and like made the whole heavenly realm shake with her anger. Like, there's no way I'm marrying this giant. So they come up with this crazy scheme where they dress Thor as Freya in a full wedding dress to kind of conceal him. And then he goes to the giants and, gets pretty far through the whole process till at least the wedding reception, where he finally reveals himself and steals back Mjolnir, steals back his hammer. So it's just kind of another one fun story. But there aren't really that many stories with Freya. Like I was saying earlier, I wish there were more because, we don't know that much about her and her personality. And I wish we did. And it's unlikely that we're really going to find too many more sources in an archaeological record, that can tell us much about her. I see some of you guys commenting now that that's your favorite story. It is hilarious. I highly recommend you read it. Oh my goodness. Such a funny story. Let's see. Good comments, good questions, guys. So let me see here, just checking your thoughts. Now, another thing to keep in mind when it comes to Freya, as well as all the Norse gods, is so much got lost or rearranged during the Christianization period. Now, Freya specifically had a tough time with this because she had a lot of erotic qualities to her, which kind of made her an easy target for the new religion of Christianity. Obviously, in Christianity, an asexual virgin is the pinnacle of womanly virtue, right? Mother Mary. So Freya, the kind of the antithesis of this, Freya has her own mind. She does what she wants. She's not afraid to use her feminine abilities for power and wealth. She was obviously the antithesis to the Christian ideal of womanhood. We do know that during the conversion times, Freya was often called like a whore by the various missionaries. And many of her roles in kind of everyday life of the Norse people got changed because she was associated and called upon for certain functions such as childbirth, fertility, conception, even kind of protecting the fields and the growth for spring. All of that got transitioned to the Virgin Mary during this Christianization time. And this also happened with even just terminology and names. Certain names of plants, there were many plants that were named after Freya. During Christianization, those names got changed to be called like the Virgin Mary's hair instead of Freya's hair or something like that. Different names for plants. So that was another thing that's kind of a bummer. She definitely held out in terms of her influence the most in Iceland, where she was definitely still called upon for assistance using certain Icelandic staves or sigils, all the way into the late 18th century. So she never fully lost her prominence, but I do think there was a very specific effort against Freya during the Christianization, specifically because she was such a free woman, you might say. So keep that in mind. You know, one of the reasons we don't know that much about her is likely because of this Christianization time period. And also keep in mind those that wrote down the Norse lore and the Norse stories, the poems, they were all Christian, like Snorri Sturluson, for example. So they were all men and Christian men, and they probably wanted to diminish the role, perhaps, of the goddesses or the role of women, and specifically a goddess like Freya that would pose kind of a direct challenge to the Christian theology. Okay, checking your comments here. A lot of things coming through. Braden has a super chat. Thank you so much. That is asking, can I connect with the Norse gods through tarot? Good question. Well, I do think tarot is a great tool to connect with many different deities. Tarot is definitely a tool that is much more modern. Tarot was invented in mid 1400s Northern Italy. It's gone through many variations, and yes, some of the symbolism and concepts of tarot is very archetypal and universal. And in that sense, you can kind of use tarot to tap into some of these ancient ideas that do kind of, in a way, maybe tie into the Norse cosmology. Overall, I recommend probably working with runes as opposed to tarot if you are specifically trying to connect to the Norse deities, as runes, while they weren't originally used as a divinatory system, at least it's likely they weren't used as a divinatory system by the ancient Norse people, they are still great tools. They were the writing system. I recommend looking up Icelandic staves. The sigil work in Iceland is another great tool you can use to connect with the Norse gods specifically. So yes, I do think tarot can be used because it does tap into these archetypal themes. It might not be the best tool specifically for the Norse gods. Let's see. What else do we have here? What other questions do you guys have? We have about 15 minutes or so. Okay. Let's see. AB has a good question. Would Freya be considered one of the first goddesses or gods who would be considered a sex worker? Possibly, as that's how she got her necklace. Good question. Is there any previous ones before Freya? Possible. I'd have to look in, some of the earlier pantheons, like, Egyptian or Mesopotamian or something. Let's see, what else do we have here? Questions are coming in. Ooh, okay. Alex is asking, can I seek knowledge in runes with Freya, Odin, or both? Now, Odin is the one more specifically tied to the runes. He hung himself upside down from the world tree as a form of self-sacrifice in order to get the wisdom of the runes. He sees the runes in the ripples of the water. So I would say that Odin is a deity more primarily connected to runes, but Freya is connected to divination. So this gets kind of confusing and mixed up because in modern day times, people often use runes for divination. Now, runes were mostly never used for divination in the past. There's a specific type of prophecy work in divination called Seder, and I have a whole Pagan Happy Hour episode I did last week all about how that prophecy process was done, which included perhaps some talismans, but likely those talismans weren't runes. I have several videos on my channel I did previously about runes and if they were used for divination. So I would say if you are planning on using runes for divination or want to learn more about runes for divination and want to call upon a god or goddess for help, I would primarily choose Odin for this one. Also, Freya and her type of Norse magic, that was specifically a female discipline. So it's a type of prophecy that's probably more associated with women. So if you're a man, you might not have the best luck, practicing Seder. But, Odin did a little bit and got ridiculed for it. So who knows? Let's see. Good questions. Keep them coming in. And in our last few minutes here, if you do want to donate to Pagan Happy Hour through Super Chats, now would be the time to keep the show alive, as it were. Let's see. Great comments and questions, guys. This has been such a good topic. I'm so glad you guys picked this one in the polls. Okay, let's see. Amanda is mentioning how Freya showed Odin Seder. Yes, that's true. She is the one that brought the magic to the Aesir gods. So that is true. Shin is asking, what are great ways to connect with Freya and build a relationship with her? So, creating a altar to her or having a representation of her on your altar is a great way to do that. One of the topics for my poll that didn't get picked was how to set up a pagan altar. And maybe I'll add that to next week's poll for Pagan Happy Hour because a lot of you guys were really interested in that topic. So there are many ways to do this, and the way I do pagan altars, you can actually see I'm setting up an altar for Bridget and In Bulk coming up soon. is I really change it up. Always am changing up my altar space. Right now in this new house, I'm using the fireplace mantles for my altar spaces. But I constantly change them up. So if you're wanting to work with Freya, I recommend getting a specific place. Now, it obviously doesn't have to be like a fancy little thing. It could just be a simple table, or it could even be something you set up kind of on your bedroom floor, kind of get it nice and organized, do a little prayer, do a little meditation, leave a little offering, and then you can put it away. That system especially works well if you are still living at home, living with people that might be opposed to your pagan beliefs. So setting up a little altar and just a little space and time to connect with Freya. I highly recommend guided meditations. I love guided meditations. So doing one in front of that altar after you've left an offering to try and connect with Freya. See what wisdom she has for you. See what advice she might bring. All great ways to celebrate the goddess. Now, certain gods and goddesses are kind of associated with certain times. Now, the whole kind of Freya Friday thing, I don't want to burst your bubble, but it's much more likely that Frigg is associated with Friday. So it's not like Freya's day, it's Frigga's day. But as we discussed, Frigg and Freya may or may not be the same person, or they were once one deity that split into two, so you can still call it Freya's day. So if you were wanting to specifically work with Freya, working on a Friday would be good. Also, being a goddess associated with love, paying attention to the astrological correspondences here. For Venus, when is Venus very prominent? Or any of the zodiac signs associated with Venus in particular could be useful. So paying attention to that astrological timing could be good, but you don't have to. I mean, really, anytime you are connecting with her attributes can be a great way to honor Freya. Even something silly. Now, this might be a bit silly, but if you have a little altar to Freya, maybe you have a little piece of amber or a little picture of her, and maybe a little offering vessel with a bit of meat in there. You can even ask her to bless something like your makeup brushes. As the goddess of beauty, as a goddess that got ahead in the world through using her feminine wiles, she would be a great goddess to work with for any type of that magic, any type of that kind of glamour magic. So a lot you can do there. But great question. We just kind of went on a tangent. So let's see what else we got here. Let's see. Adam is asking a choice of wine for Freya. Now, I would recommend mead, which is the drink that was most commonly drunk among the Norse. And actually, mead is becoming a lot easier to find as of late. Actually have a video I made a couple months ago all about the history of mead that you can check out on my channel if you're interested. Definitely recommend. Nicole has a super chat here and an excellent suggestion for connecting with Freya. She says, one idea is to connect One idea to connect with Freya is building things for her and using stones, as there is a story of her helping a man who built a stone altar to her and says she is one of the easiest gods to connect with, which is reassuring. That's good. Yes. Freya has never really been associated with violence in particular, even though she is a battle goddess to a certain extent. Never really associated with the violence aspect of that. Let's see. Just checking your comments here in our last few minutes. Oh my goodness. So if you have a question on Freya or anything, now is the time before we sign off. Pagan Chords is asking, do you think male beauty is also associated with her, or would that be more of a Freyr thing? Um, Freyja is associated with male fertility, so I would kind of maybe go more towards Freyja, though I think Freya would be open to helping you out too. So either one, perhaps. Um, let's see. Krishna is saying in the comments, I read that one theory is that the earlier form was named Freya, which then evolved to Freya and Frigg separately and subsequently. I can't pronounce things today. Yeah, definitely. That's a good theory. Lots of good theories out there. Let's see. I see Ocean Keltoy in the comments. Thanks for joining us today. Love your channel. Let's see. Marie is asking, how do I call upon her? This is a great question because a lot of people, they want to work with deities, they want to have an experience with them. And we talked about kind of setting up that altar. How do I call upon her, right? Now, in Norse paganism specifically, you kind of want to think about the gift cycle. So the offering component is kind of important here. It's probably not enough to just set up a pretty altar. You want to leave something for her, like a glass of mead, or some little trinket, some type of thing, because it's that offering that you're giving to Freya, which will encourage her to connect with you, whether that's through dreams, through meditation, through synchronicity, whatever it is. That offering component is really important. And you can also do offerings outside. I have several videos of like different types of offerings, how to give offerings, things like that. Now, if you're doing an inside offering, a lot of people ask, like, how do you dispose of the offering? Like, what are you supposed to do? What I usually do for inside offerings, and right now, because it's cold outside, I'm doing a lot of inside offerings. I'll put a little glass of something like mead, for example, on my little altar here, and I'll just let it sit for a few days. I'll do a couple of meditations. I'll focus on trying to connect with Freya. Specifically for Freya, for me, I try and connect with her before I do my little beauty routine, put on makeup, things like that, because she is the goddess of beauty, right? So she can really help us out a lot in that regard. And then, when it's been a few days, obviously you don't want that mead just sitting there forever. I pour it out into the ground as kind of like a cheers to her, buy some flowers, I just kind of pour it near some of our flowers that we have growing in our garden right now. So it's an easy way to dispose it, though even better, if you do have a outdoor space, because of course, a lot of offerings were historically outdoors as well. So you can do that too. So a lot of different things you can do. Paganism is a lot about finding what feels comfortable for you and trusting that. We're so accustomed when we think of religion of someone else telling us what to do and how to believe and how to practice. And paganism is much more about trusting our intuition. Our intuition is going to show us the way, it's going to show us the path on how we can best connect, how we can best practice our faith. There is no rule book, there is no leader here. So it feels kind of awkward to just trust yourself and be like, this is how I feel Freya wants me to connect with her. But really, that's the best way to be pagan, is to, for the first time, trust ourselves, trust our intuition. That's the best way to connect, even if it feels a bit counterintuitive at times. So great comments, great questions, guys. Thank you so much for joining me this Friday. This has been a really fun pagan happy hour. I was hoping you guys would pick this topic, and I was so happy to see this morning that you did. Of course, stay tuned. We have a lot of good pagan happy hours upcoming. I think probably next week we will most likely be doing an in bulk pagan happy hour, as that is the next big pagan holiday headed our way. So I'll be talking a lot about Brigid, pretty soon I'll be sharing an in-bulk altar decorating video for fun if you guys want to watch that. And of course, subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. We're a family here. I try and keep things very positive and very welcoming for pagans of all different kinds. So thank you all so much for joining me this Friday, this Freya's Day, and I'll see you next week. Bye.